The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the general store, and Nathaniel Lawson stepped down onto the dusty street of Nevada, Missouri, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread that had become all too familiar over the past 3 weeks. This was the fourth town she had traveled to since leaving Pennsylvania, and she could already see the disappointment forming in the eyes of the man waiting on the wooden sidewalk. His arms crossed over his barrel chest as he surveyed her with the critical assessment of someone examining livestock at auction. "You are Miss Lawson," the man's voice carried across the afternoon heat of August 1883, and Nathaniel could hear the skepticism already creeping into his tone. "Yes, sir. I am Nathaniel Lawson, though most people call me Nettie." She smoothed down the front of her brown traveling dress, aware that 3 weeks on trains and stagecoaches had left her looking rumpled and plain, her mousy brown hair escaping from its pins, her face shiny with perspiration and dust. The man, who had identified himself in correspondence as Marcus Thornton, a prosperous merchant in need of a wife, walked around her in a slow circle. Nathaniel felt her cheeks burning with humiliation as he examined her from every angle, not even bothering to hide his displeasure. She was 22 years old, of average height and build, with unremarkable features that had never turned heads back home in Philadelphia. Her eyes were her only notable feature, a clear gray that sometimes looked blue in certain light, but she knew that was hardly enough to compensate for her lack of beauty. "The photograph you sent was very flattering," Marcus said, his voice flat. "I expected someone with more refinement, more elegance. The photograph was taken only 6 months ago, sir. It was an honest representation. Perhaps the photographer was exceptionally skilled." Marcus sighed heavily, shaking his head. "Miss Lawson, I am a man of some standing in this community. I require a wife who can represent my business interests appropriately, someone who can entertain visitors with grace and charm. I am afraid you simply will not do." The words hit her like physical blows, though they were not new. She had heard variations of the same rejection 3 times before, each one chipping away at what little confidence she had possessed when she left Philadelphia. The first man had been a rancher in Kansas who had taken one look at her and announced she was too thin and plain to bear healthy children. The second, a banker in a small Nebraska town, had complained that she lacked the sophistication he required in a wife. The third, a hotel owner in a railroad town, had simply sent her away without explanation after meeting her at the station. "I understand," Nathaniel said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I will make arrangements to continue on." "The next stagecoach heading east leaves tomorrow morning," Marcus said, his tone already dismissive as he turned away. "I trust you have sufficient funds for your return journey." Nathaniel thought of the small leather purse tucked into her carpet bag, containing exactly $14.37. It would not be enough to return to Philadelphia, not by a considerable margin. She had used nearly all her savings to make this journey west, following the promise of a new life and a fresh start after her father's death, had left her alone and penniless in a boarding house where the landlady had made it clear her welcome was wearing thin. "Yes, sir," she lied, because what else could she say? Marcus Thornton walked away without another word, disappearing into his general store and leaving Nathaniel standing alone on the sidewalk with her single carpet bag at her feet and nowhere to go. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Nevada, Missouri, and she felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She refused to cry in public, however. She had not cried during any of the previous rejections, and she would not start now. "Excuse me, miss." A gentle voice spoke from behind her, and Nathaniel turned to find an older woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back into a neat bun. I could not help but overhear. Are you in need of assistance? I am quite all right, thank you, Nathaniel said automatically, though it was obviously untrue. Nonsense. I am Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, and my husband owns the boarding house just down the street. You look as though you could use a cool drink and a place to sit down. The woman's voice was firm but kind, brooking no argument. Nathaniel felt her resistance crumbling. I do not have much money for lodging. We can discuss that later. Come along now before you faint from the heat, Mrs. Patterson picked up Nathaniel's carpetbag before she could protest and started walking down the sidewalk with the confident stride of someone who was accustomed to taking charge. The boarding house was a two-story white building with a wide porch and rocking chairs positioned to catch the evening breeze. Inside, the rooms were clean and simply furnished, with lace curtains at the windows and the smell of bread baking somewhere in the back. Mrs. Patterson led Nathaniel to a small parlor and pressed her into a comfortable chair before disappearing to fetch refreshments. Nathaniel sat in the quiet room, her hands folded in her lap, and allowed herself to acknowledge the desperate reality of her situation. She had $14 to her name, no prospects for employment, and no way to return home even if there had been a home to return to. The boarding house in Philadelphia had likely already rented out her small room to someone else. She had no family, no friends who could help her, and apparently no man in the entire Western Territory who found her acceptable enough to marry. Mrs. Patterson returned with a tray containing a pitcher of cold water, 2 glasses, and a plate of cookies. She poured water for both of them and settled into the chair across from Nathaniel with the air of someone preparing for a long conversation. "Now then," Mrs. Patterson said, "tell me what brought you to Nevada, Missouri, and what that fool Marcus Thornton said to leave you looking so defeated." Something about the woman's straightforward kindness broke through Nathaniel's careful composure. The whole story came tumbling out over the next half hour, from her father's death from pneumonia the previous winter, to the discovery that he had left nothing but debts, to her decision to answer advertisements for mail-order brides as the only way to secure a future for herself. She explained the rejections, the dwindling funds, and the growing certainty that she was destined to end up destitute on the streets or forced into work that did not bear thinking about. Mrs. Patterson listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly stern as the tale unfolded. When Nathaniel finally fell silent, the older woman shook her head with obvious disgust. "Marcus Thornton is a pompous fool who cares more about appearances than substance," she said firmly. "And those other men you described sound equally foolish. A woman's worth is not determined by the arrangement of her features, and any man who thinks otherwise is not worth having as a husband." "That is kind of you to say, but it does not change my circumstances," Nathaniel said quietly. "I am plain. I have always been plain. My mother used to say I had a pleasant face, but pleasant is not the same as pretty, and men who are seeking wives from catalogs and photographs want pretty. They want someone who will enhance their standing in the community, not someone who will simply fade into the background." "Then those men are blind idiots," Mrs. Patterson declared. "But that is neither here nor there. The immediate question is what you will do now." "I do not know," Nathaniel admitted. "I suppose I could try to find work here, save enough money to continue west or perhaps return east. Though I am not sure what work I might be qualified for. Can you read and write well?" "Yes, very well. My father was a school teacher before he became ill. He ensured I had an excellent education. Can you cook and keep house?" "Yes, though I have no professional experience." "Can you sew?" "Yes, adequately." Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. There might be some options available, The schoolteacher position is filled, but Mrs. Henderson at the dress shop has been complaining about needing help, and the restaurant on Main Street is always looking for waitresses. You could stay here at the boarding house and work off your rent until you get on your feet." It was more than Nathaniel had dared to hope for, and she felt a surge of gratitude toward this kind stranger. "That would be extremely generous, Mrs. Patterson. I would work very hard, I promise you." "I am sure you would. We will get you settled into a room, and then tomorrow we can make inquiries about employment." Mrs. Patterson stood, picking up the tray. "In the meantime, you should rest. You look exhausted. The room Mrs. Patterson showed her to was small but clean, with a single bed covered in a faded quilt, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that overlooked the street. Nathaniel unpacked her few belongings, washed her face and hands, and lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a few minutes. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by travel and emotional turmoil, and did not wake until the following morning when sunlight streamed through the window, and the smell of coffee and bacon drifted up from downstairs. She dressed quickly in her other serviceable dress, a dark blue cotton that was slightly less wrinkled than the brown one she had worn the previous day, and made her way downstairs to find a dining room full of boarders eating breakfast. Mrs. Patterson waved her over to an empty seat and placed a plate of food in front of her without asking if she was hungry. "Eat up," the older woman said. "We have a busy day ahead of us." After breakfast, Mrs. Patterson took Nathaniel on a tour of Nevada, Missouri, introducing her to various shop owners and business people who might have work available. The town was larger than Nathaniel had initially realized, with a population of nearly 2,000 people. It served as a trading center for the surrounding farms and ranches, with a railroad depot that brought goods and travelers from the east. The main street boasted several general stores, a bank, a hotel, 3 saloons, 2 churches, a newspaper office, and various other establishments. Mrs. Henderson at the dress shop was a thin, sharp-featured woman who looked Nathaniel up and down with a critical eye before shaking her head. "I need someone with experience in fine sewing and tailoring, someone who understands the latest fashions from back east. No offense to you, dear, but you look like you have been sleeping in those clothes for a week." The restaurant owner was more blunt. "I need girls who are pretty enough to attract customers and keep them coming back. You seem like a nice enough person, but nice does not sell meals." By noon, they had been turned away from 7 different establishments, each rejection delivered with varying degrees of politeness, but all amounting to the same thing. Nathaniel was not pretty enough, not experienced enough, not sophisticated enough to be worth hiring. She could see Mrs. Patterson growing increasingly angry on her behalf, but she herself had moved beyond anger into a numb sort of acceptance. This was simply how the world worked. She had been foolish to think otherwise. They were walking back toward the boarding house, both of them silent and discouraged, when a man on horseback came galloping down the main street at a speed that sent pedestrians scattering. He pulled up sharply in front of the general store, his horse dancing sideways as he dismounted in one fluid motion. Nathaniel had a brief impression of height, broad shoulders, and a dark hat pulled low over his eyes before Mrs. Patterson grabbed her arm and pulled her back against the building. "That is Russell Everett," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. "He owns the Double E Ranch about 10 miles outside of town. He is a good man, but he has a reputation for being rough around the edges. Lost his wife to fever about 5 years back, and he has been raising his younger sister alone ever since." Nathaniel watched as Russell Everett strode into the general store with the confident gait of a man who was accustomed to getting what he wanted. Even from a distance, she could see he was different from Marcus Thornton and the other men who had rejected her. There was something untamed about him, something that suggested he cared more about substance than appearance. But that was probably wishful thinking on her part. "Come along," Mrs. Patterson said, tugging at her arm. "Let us go back and have some lunch. I want to think about this situation." That afternoon, Nathaniel helped Mrs. Patterson with various chores around the boarding house, insisting on earning her keep even though the older woman protested. She washed dishes, swept floors, and helped prepare vegetables for dinner, grateful to have something to do with her hands that kept her from dwelling on her impossible situation. The other boarders were a mixed group, primarily men who worked in town or on nearby ranches, along with one older couple who seemed to be permanent residents. Most of them were polite but incurious about the new arrival, focused on their own meals and conversations. Nathaniel was happy to fade into the background, serving food and clearing plates without drawing attention to herself. She was in the kitchen washing dishes after dinner when she heard raised voices from the dining room. Mrs. Patterson's voice carried clearly through the door, sharp with irritation. "Russell Everett, I do not care what you think about your sister's plans. She is 18 years old, and if she wants to move to St. Louis to attend nursing school, that is her decision to make. She is too young to be going off to some big city by herself." The male voice was deep and rough, with an edge of frustration. "Anything could happen to her there. She belongs at home where I can keep her safe. Safe and stifled are not the same thing, and you know it. That girl has been taking care of your household for 5 years, ever since Mary died. She deserves a chance to have her own life. And who is going to take care of the house if she leaves? I cannot run a ranch and manage a household at the same time. Then hire someone. Or better yet, find yourself a wife." There was a long silence, and then Russell Everett's voice came again, sounding tired. "We have been through this before, Dorothy. I am not interested in remarrying. I had my chance at happiness and it ended. I am not going to parade myself around looking for some woman who will pretend to care about me just to get a roof over her head. Not all women are mercenary, Russell. Maybe not, but the ones who would be willing to come out to a ranch in the middle of nowhere and take care of a man they barely know probably are." Nathaniel felt her cheeks burning with shame as she realized he could have been describing her situation exactly. She was indeed a woman desperate for a roof over her head, willing to marry a stranger to secure her future. Was that mercenary? She had never thought of it that way, but perhaps he was right. Mrs. Patterson's voice dropped lower, and Nathaniel could not make out the words. She dried the last dish and hung up the towel, wondering if she should leave through the back door to avoid encountering the rancher when he left. But before she could decide, Mrs. Patterson pushed through the kitchen door with a determined expression on her face. "Nathaniel, come with me. I want you to meet someone." "Oh no, Mrs. Patterson, I really do not think. Nonsense. Come along." Nathaniel had no choice but to follow the older woman back into the dining room, where Russell Everett sat at one of the tables with a cup of coffee in front of him. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 30s, with dark brown hair that was a bit too long and needed cutting, and eyes that were such a deep brown they were almost black. His face was tanned and weathered from years of outdoor work, with lines around his eyes and mouth that suggested he had once smiled often, though his expression at the moment was decidedly grim. He wore typical ranch clothing, canvas pants, a worn cotton shirt, and a vest, all covered with a fine layer of dust. "Russell, this is Miss Nathaniel Lawson," Mrs. Patterson said. "She is staying at the boarding house temporarily while she looks for employment." "Miss Lawson, this is Russell Everett, owner of the Double E Ranch." Russell Everett stood politely, his height becoming even more apparent. He was well over 6 feet tall, with the lean, muscled build of a man who did hard physical labor every day. He touched the brim of his hat and nodded to her. "Madam, Mr. Everett." Nathaniel could not quite meet his eyes, feeling awkward and embarrassed by the conversation she had overheard. "Miss Lawson recently arrived from Philadelphia," Mrs. Patterson continued, her tone deliberately casual. "She has excellent domestic skills, can read and write well, and is looking for a position that might utilize her talents." "Dorothy," Russell said warningly. "I am just making conversation, Russell." Mrs. Patterson's expression was innocence itself, but Nathaniel could sense the maneuvering happening beneath the surface. "I appreciate the introduction, but I am not looking to hire anyone for the ranch. Of course not. I was merely introducing two people who happened to be in my boarding house at the same time. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to check on something in the kitchen." Mrs. Patterson disappeared before either of them could protest, leaving them standing awkwardly in the dining room. Russell Everett sat back down and gestured to the chair across from him. "You might as well sit down, since Dorothy clearly expects us to have a conversation." Nathaniel sat gingerly on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap. "I apologize for the ambush, Mr. Everett. I had no idea Mrs. Patterson was planning this. She has been trying to convince me to hire household help for months," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Though usually she suggests her niece or some other local woman." He studied her for a moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Philadelphia is a long way from Missouri. What brings you out here?" Nathaniel hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But there seemed little point in being dishonest when her circumstances were so obvious. "I came west to meet a gentleman who had advertised for a mail-order bride. Unfortunately, he found me unsuitable upon my arrival." She expected to see judgment or pity in his expression, but instead he just nodded slowly. "Marcus Thornton. Yes, you know him. Everyone knows everyone in a town this size. Thornton is a fool who cares more about what people think than about anything real or substantial." Russell's voice carried a note of contempt. "His first wife was a good woman who deserved better than him. She died of influenza 3 years ago, and he has been looking for a replacement ever since, but only if she meets his exacting standards. I'm afraid I did not meet those standards." Russell Everett looked at her directly for the first time, his gaze moving over her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. She forced herself to sit still, waiting for the inevitable judgment, the polite but dismissive conclusion that she was indeed as plain as everyone seemed to think. "You have kind eyes," he said finally, "and you do not put on airs or pretend to be something you are not. Those are rare qualities in a person, and far more valuable than a pretty face." Nathaniel felt her breath catch in her throat. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She did not know how to respond. Russell seemed to realize he had made her uncomfortable and looked away, focusing on his coffee. "How long do you plan to stay in Nevada?" "I am not sure. I am trying to find employment so I can save money for travel, but so far I have not had much success. It seems my qualifications are not in high demand." "What can you do?" "I can cook, clean, manage a household budget, read and write well, and do basic arithmetic. I helped my father with his schoolwork before he died, so I can assist with education if needed. I am hardworking and reliable, though I understand those qualities are difficult to prove without references or experience." Russell was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tapping against the side of his coffee cup in a thoughtful rhythm. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, as though he was working through an idea as he explained it. "My sister Rebecca wants to go to St. Louis to attend nursing school. She has been accepted into a program that starts in September, which is only a few weeks away. I have been trying to convince her not to go, not because I do not want her to have opportunities, but because I am worried about her being alone in a big city, and because I do not know how I will manage the household without her." "That is understandable," Nathaniel said cautiously, unsure where this was going. "If I had someone reliable to take care of the house, I would not have a legitimate reason to ask Rebecca to stay. She has sacrificed 5 years of her own life to take care of me and the ranch, and she deserves the chance to pursue her own dreams." He looked up at Nathaniel, his expression serious. "I am not proposing marriage, Miss Lawson. But I am in need of a housekeeper, someone who can cook and clean and manage the household while I run the ranch. The position would include room and board plus wages of $20 per month. It would be hard work, and the ranch is 10 miles outside of town, so you would be fairly isolated. But it would give you stable employment and the chance to save money while you figure out your next steps." It was more than she had dared to hope for, and yet Nathaniel felt a strange reluctance to accept immediately. "You are offering me employment based on a 10-minute conversation. You know nothing about me, Mr. Everett. I could be completely incompetent. Dorothy Patterson is an excellent judge of character, and she would not have introduced us if she thought you were incompetent or untrustworthy. Besides, I am a fairly good judge of character myself, and my instincts tell me you are exactly what you present yourself to be. An honest woman in difficult circumstances, trying to make the best of a bad situation." He paused, then added, "And to be completely frank, Miss Lawson, I am running out of options. Rebecca is determined to leave and I need help, so we would be doing each other a favor." Nathaniel considered the offer carefully. It was employment, which was more than she had expected to find. It was also isolated and potentially lonely, working for a man she did not know in a place far from town. But what other choice did she have? Her funds were almost gone, and the alternatives were growing increasingly grim. "I accept your offer, Mr. Everett," she said quietly. "And I promise you I will work hard to justify your faith in me." "I am sure you will. Can you be ready to leave tomorrow morning? I need to get back to the ranch, and it would be helpful to have you settled before Rebecca leaves next week." "Yes, I can be ready." They worked out the practical details of the arrangement, including her duties and schedule, before Russell finished his coffee and stood to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "One more thing, Miss Lawson. I want to be clear that this is a professional arrangement. You will have your own room with a lock on the door, and I will treat you with complete respect. I am not looking for anything beyond a working relationship, and I hope you feel the same." "I understand completely, Mr. Everett. I am grateful for the employment opportunity, nothing more." He nodded and left, and Nathaniel sat alone in the dining room for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the kitchen with a satisfied expression. "Well, that went rather well, I think." "You planned that entire encounter," Nathaniel said, though there was no heat in her accusation. "Of course I did. Russell needs help whether he wants to admit it or not, and you need employment. It was obvious to anyone with eyes that you would be perfect for each other." "As a housekeeper," she added hastily when Nathaniel looked alarmed. "I meant perfect for the working arrangement. He seems like a good man." "He is. He had a hard few years after Mary died, and he poured all his energy into the ranch and taking care of Rebecca. He has forgotten how to live for himself. But that is not your concern. Your job is simply to keep his house in order and give him one less thing to worry about." The next morning, Russell Everett arrived at the boarding house driving a wagon loaded with supplies from town. Nathaniel was waiting on the porch with her carpetbag, having said her goodbyes to Mrs. Patterson and promising to visit town whenever possible. Russell loaded her bag into the back of the wagon and helped her up onto the seat, his hand warm and strong as he steadied her climb. The ride out to the Double E Ranch took nearly an hour, following a dirt road that wound through rolling prairie dotted with cattle and occasional stands of trees. Russell was quiet during the journey, focused on driving, and Nathaniel was content to look at the landscape. It was beautiful in a stark, endless way that was completely different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia. The sky seemed impossibly vast, stretching from horizon to horizon without interruption, and the air smelled of grass and dust, and something wild she could not quite identify. The ranch house came into view gradually, a long, low structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides and a roof that showed signs of recent repair. Behind it stood a large barn, several outbuildings, and a corral containing half a dozen horses. Everything looked well maintained but clearly built for function rather than beauty, sturdy and practical in the way of structures meant to withstand harsh weather and hard use. Russell pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and helped Nathaniel down. "Welcome to the Double E. It is not fancy, but it is solid and comfortable." A young woman burst through the front door before Nathaniel could respond, her face alight with excitement. She was small and pretty, with dark hair like her brother and bright blue eyes that must have come from their mother. She wore a simple cotton dress and an apron, and her smile was genuine and welcoming. "You must be Miss Lawson. Russell told me about you when he came home last night. I am so happy to meet you." She grabbed Nathaniel's hands and squeezed them enthusiastically. "I am Rebecca, Russell's sister. Come inside, come inside. I want to show you everything before I leave next week." Nathaniel found herself being pulled into the house by the energetic young woman, Russell following behind with her carpet bag and an expression of fond exasperation. The interior of the house was spacious and well organized, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area, a hallway leading to bedrooms, and simple but comfortable furniture throughout. Everything was clean and tidy, showing Rebecca's careful management. Over the next hour, Rebecca gave her a comprehensive tour of the house and explained all the routines and systems she had established over the years. Where the cooking supplies were kept, how Russell liked his coffee made, which days she did laundry, how she managed the household budget, and 1,000 other small details that made the difference between a house that ran smoothly and one that descended into chaos. Nathaniel took mental notes of everything, determined to maintain the same standards Rebecca had set. "Russell is easy to cook for," Rebecca said as they stood in the kitchen. "He will eat just about anything without complaint. But he does like his coffee strong, and he appreciates fresh bread when you have time to make it. He usually comes in for breakfast at sunrise, lunch at midday if he is working close to the house, and dinner at sunset. Sometimes he works late and misses meals, so it helps to have things that can be kept warm." "What about hired hands? Are there men who work on the ranch?" "Usually there are 2 or 3 hands living in the bunkhouse during busy seasons, but right now it is just Frank, and he is getting older and mostly helps with fence repair and light work. Russell does most of the heavy ranch work himself. He is very particular about his cattle." They moved through the house room by room, and Rebecca showed her the small bedroom that would be hers. It was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a chair by the window, but it was clean and private, with a door that indeed had a lock on the inside. It was more than Nathaniel had expected, and she felt a wave of gratitude toward Russell Everett for being as good as his word. Russell himself appeared in the doorway as they were finishing the tour. "Rebecca, I need to ride out to check on the north pasture. Miss Lawson, I will leave you in Rebecca's capable hands for the rest of the day. Tomorrow you can start taking over responsibilities as you feel comfortable. Thank you, Mr. Everett. You can call me Russell. We are not much for formality out here. He hesitated, then added, and for what it is worth, Miss Lawson, I am glad you are here. It gives me peace of mind knowing Rebecca can pursue her dreams while the ranch continues to run smoothly. He left before she could respond, his boots heavy on the wooden floor and then crunching on gravel as he walked out to the barn. Rebecca watched him go with an expression of affection mixed with exasperation. He has been so worried about me going to St. Louis, she said quietly. He does not think I notice, but I see him lying awake at night sometimes, staring at the ceiling and worrying. He has been taking care of me since I was 13, and I think he has forgotten that I am an adult now, capable of taking care of myself. He loves you very much. That is obvious. I know he does, and I love him too, but I need to have my own life, make my own choices. I want to be a nurse, to help people the way the nurses helped when our mother was sick. Russell does not understand that, or maybe he does and he is just scared of being alone again. Rebecca turned to face Nathaniel, her expression suddenly serious. Promise me you will take good care of him. He acts like he is invincible, but he is not. He works too hard, does not eat properly when I am not here to make him, and he spends too much time alone with his thoughts. He needs someone to look after him, even if he does not think he does. I promise I will do my best, Nathaniel said, touched by the young woman's concern for her brother. The rest of the day passed in a blur of information and activity. Rebecca was determined to teach Nathaniel everything she needed to know before leaving, and she approached the task with the same energy she seemed to bring to everything else. They cooked dinner together, a hearty meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables from the garden behind the house. Russell came in at sunset, dusty and tired but satisfied with whatever he had accomplished during the day. He washed up on the back porch and joined them at the table, where they ate in comfortable silence broken only by occasional comments about ranch business or Rebecca's plans for St. Louis. Nathaniel watched him when she thought he was not looking, trying to reconcile her first impression with the reality of the man across the table. He was rough-edged and quiet, with calloused hands and a face marked by sun and wind. But there was something solid about him, something trustworthy that she had not encountered in the other men who had rejected her. He had offered her employment without knowing anything about her beyond Dorothy Patterson's recommendation and his own instincts. He had promised her a safe place to work and had shown no indication that he expected anything beyond what they had agreed upon. It was more than she had received from anyone else since leaving Philadelphia. That night, alone in her small room, Nathaniel lay in bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. The wind whispered through the grass outside her window, cattle lowed somewhere in the distance, and the house itself creaked and groaned in that particular way of wooden structures at night. It was different from the city sound she had known all her life, but it was not unpleasant. It felt peaceful in a way she had not experienced in a long time. She thought about Russell Everett's words from the previous evening, his statement that she had kind eyes and did not put on airs. It was perhaps the nicest thing anyone had said to her in years, and it had cost him nothing. She wondered what kind of man would notice kindness when everyone else only saw plainness. She wondered what it would be like to work for him, to be part of his household, to carve out a small life for herself in this wild, open country so far from everything she had known. Eventually, she fell asleep, and for the first time in weeks, she slept deeply and dreamlessly, without the anxiety that had plagued her since leaving Philadelphia. The next week passed quickly, as Nathaniel learned the routines of the ranch and gradually took over the household responsibilities from Rebecca. She rose before dawn to make coffee and prepare breakfast, cleaned and organized during the day, tended the vegetable garden, fed the chickens that scratched around the yard, and prepared substantial meals for the evening. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia, but it was also satisfying in a way that surprised her. There was something deeply rewarding about seeing immediate results from her labor, about knowing that the bread she baked would be eaten with appreciation, that the clean house and mended clothes made a real difference in the daily lives of the people around her. Russell was exactly as Rebecca had described: easy to please, uncomplaining about meals or housekeeping, and appreciative of small comforts like fresh coffee waiting when he came in from morning chores. He was not talkative, often going hours without saying more than a few words, but his silence was companionable rather than hostile. Nathaniel found herself growing comfortable with his presence, no longer feeling the need to fill every moment with conversation. On Rebecca's last day before leaving for St. Louis, Russell drove her into Nevada to catch the train, and he asked Nathaniel if she wanted to come along. She accepted, partly because she wanted to say goodbye to Rebecca and partly because she wanted to see Mrs. Patterson and assure her that everything was working out well. The goodbye at the train station was emotional, with Rebecca hugging her brother fiercely and making him promise to write to her every week. Russell looked uncomfortable with the public display of affection, but he held his sister tight and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh through her tears. When Rebecca turned to Nathaniel, she hugged her just as fiercely. "Thank you for being here," Rebecca said. "I could not leave if I did not know he had someone to look after him." "I will take good care of everything," Nathaniel promised. "You focus on your studies and becoming the best nurse you can be." "I will, and you take care of yourself too." Russell is a good man, but he can be stubborn and oblivious sometimes. Do not let him work you too hard. The train whistle blew, and Rebecca grabbed her bags and climbed aboard, waving from the window as the train pulled away from the station. Russell stood watching until the train disappeared from view, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Nathaniel with a slight smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Well, I suppose that is that. She is off on her grand adventure and we are left to manage things at home." "She will do wonderfully," Nathaniel said. "She is bright and capable and determined." "I know. That is what makes it so hard to watch her go." They stopped at the boarding house so Nathaniel could visit with Mrs. Patterson, who was delighted to hear that the arrangement was working out well. The older woman pulled Nathaniel aside for a private conversation while Russell conducted business at the general store. "You look better already," Mrs. Patterson observed. "Less worried. The ranch life agrees with you." "It does, surprisingly. I have always lived in cities, but there is something appealing about the simplicity of ranch life. And Russell is a good employer. He is fair and respectful and appreciative of the work I do." "He is a good man who has been alone too long," Mrs. Patterson said carefully. "Do not be surprised if that situation changes over time." Nathaniel felt her cheeks warming. "Mrs. Patterson, this is strictly an employment arrangement. Russell has made that very clear, and I have no expectations beyond that." "Of course, dear. I am just saying that situations can change, that is all. Now, you make sure to come visit me whenever Russell brings you to town. I enjoy your company." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived home, the house seemed emptier without Rebecca's cheerful presence filling it. Nathaniel threw herself into preparing dinner, needing to stay busy to avoid thinking about how isolated she now was, 10 miles from town with only Russell for company. They ate dinner in near silence, the absence of Rebecca's chatter making the meal feel awkward and strange. Nathaniel cleared the dishes and was washing them when Russell appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hat in his hands. "Miss Lawson, I want to thank you for coming here and taking over Rebecca's responsibilities. I know it is not the situation you were hoping for when you came west, but I am grateful for your help." "You do not need to thank me, Russell. This is my job and I am happy to do it." "Even so, I want you to know that I appreciate it. And if you ever feel uncomfortable here, or if you want to leave for any reason, you just let me know and I will take you back to town. No questions asked." Nathaniel turned from the dishes to face him, touched by his consideration. "That is kind of you to say, but I am content here. More content than I have been in a long time, actually. You have given me stability and purpose, and those are precious things." Russell nodded, looking relieved. "Good. That is good. Well, I will leave you to finish up. I have some paperwork to do before bed." He disappeared into what Rebecca had called his study, a small room off the main living area where he kept the ranch's financial records and business correspondence. Nathaniel finished the dishes and tidied the kitchen, then retired to her own room with a book she had brought from Philadelphia. But she found herself unable to concentrate on the words, her mind wandering instead to the complex man on the other side of the house, working late into the night to keep his ranch running smoothly while grieving the departure of his sister. Over the following weeks, Nathaniel and Russell fell into a comfortable rhythm. They had breakfast together at sunrise, her making eggs and bacon and fresh bread while he drank multiple cups of strong coffee and planned his day. He would head out to work on the ranch, and she would spend her day managing the household. In the evenings, they would eat dinner together and sometimes sit on the porch afterward, watching the sun set over the prairie while Russell told her about the ranch or asked about her life in Philadelphia. She learned that he had inherited the ranch from his father 10 years earlier, when he was only 22 years old and newly married to a woman named Mary. They had been happy together, building up the ranch and planning for a family, when Mary contracted a fever during a harsh winter and died within 3 days. Rebecca, only 13 at the time and newly orphaned by their mother's death the year before, had come to live with him, and they had supported each other through their shared grief. "I threw myself into the ranch after Mary died," Russell told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "Worked from sunrise to long after sunset until I was too exhausted to think about anything. Rebecca took care of everything else, the house, the meals, the laundry. She was just a child, but she grew up fast. Maybe too fast. I should have paid more attention to what she was sacrificing to take care of me." "You were grieving," Nathaniel said gently, "and from what Rebecca told me, she wanted to help. She loves you, and taking care of you gave her purpose during a difficult time." "Maybe, but 5 years is a long time for a young woman to put her own life on hold. She should have been going to dances and courting and having fun, not cooking meals for her older brother and mending his clothes. She is doing what she wants now. That is what matters." Russell was quiet for a moment, then changed the subject, asking about her father and her life before coming west. Nathaniel found herself telling him things she had not shared with anyone, about her father's slow decline after her mother's death when Nathaniel was 16, about the struggle to make ends meet on a schoolteacher's salary, about the loneliness of being an only child with no extended family to rely on. "When my father died, I realized I had no real ties to Philadelphia anymore," she said. "No family, no close friends, no prospects for the future. The landlady at the boarding house made it clear I would need to pay my rent or leave, and I had no way to earn enough money to support myself. Becoming a mail-order bride seemed like the only option, a way to start fresh somewhere new. And instead you ended up here, working as a housekeeper on a ranch in Missouri. Yes, but I think it might be better than what I was hoping for. At least here I have control over my own situation. I am earning my own money and building toward a future I choose for myself. That is a good way to look at it, Russell said. He was quiet for another moment, then added, "You know, when Dorothy first suggested hiring you, I was not sure it was a good idea. I thought it might be awkward, having a stranger living in the house. But you fit in here, Miss Lawson. You make the house feel like a home again the way it did when Mary was alive. That is a gift, and I do not take it for granted." Nathaniel felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." She did not tell him that his words had touched something deep inside her, a place that had been wounded by rejection and disappointment. She did not tell him that, for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt valued for something beyond her appearance or her potential usefulness as a wife. She did not tell him that she found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the quiet moments of companionship that made her feel less alone in the world. The summer faded into early autumn, and the work on the ranch intensified as Russell prepared for the approaching winter. There was hay to cut and store, cattle to move to lower pastures, fences to repair before the weather turned cold. He hired 2 temporary hands to help with the heavy work, young men from town who bunked in the old bunkhouse and ate their meals at the main house. Nathaniel found herself cooking for 4 instead of 2, which kept her busy but was not unpleasant. The hired hands were polite and respectful, treating her with the casual courtesy common among ranch workers toward the woman who cooked their meals. In mid-September, a letter arrived from Rebecca, full of enthusiasm about nursing school and descriptions of life in St. Louis. She was loving her classes, making friends with the other students, and discovering that she had a real talent for medical work. Russell read the letter at dinner, his expression softening as he absorbed his sister's happiness. "She sounds like she is thriving," Nathaniel observed. "She does. I am glad, even though I miss having her here." He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "I was wrong to try to keep her from going. She belongs in St. Louis doing important work, not stuck out here taking care of me. You are not wrong to worry about her. That is what family does. Maybe, but Dorothy was right. I was trying to keep her safe at the expense of letting her live her own life. That was not fair to her." One evening in late September, Russell came in from work looking troubled. He ate dinner in silence, barely tasting his food, and afterward he paced the porch instead of sitting in his usual chair. Nathaniel watched him through the kitchen window as she cleaned up, wondering what was bothering him but not wanting to intrude on his thoughts. Finally, she dried her hands and went out onto the porch. "Is something wrong?" Russell stopped pacing and leaned against the porch railing, staring out at the darkening prairie. "I ran into Marcus Thornton in town today. He asked me how my new housekeeper was working out." Nathaniel felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were the best housekeeper I had ever had, and that I was grateful you were here." He laughed and said something insulting about how I must not have very high standards if I was willing to employ someone as plain as you. Russell's voice was tight with anger. "I wanted to hit him, Miss Lawson. I wanted to knock him down in the middle of Main Street and make him take back every word. But you did not." "No, I did not. Because I am not a violent man, and because getting into a brawl with the town's leading merchant would not help anyone. But I wanted to. And I wanted to tell him that he is a blind fool who would not recognize a good woman if she was standing right in front of him." Nathaniel felt her eyes burning with unshed tears. No one had ever defended her like that before, had ever been angry on her behalf. You do not have to defend me, Russell. I am used to men like Marcus Thornton and their opinions. Well, you should not have to be used to it. Their opinions are worthless, based on nothing but shallow judgments and narrow minds. He turned to face her directly, his expression fierce in the fading light. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Miss Lawson. I see a woman who traveled across the country alone to seek a better life. I see someone who kept her dignity and composure, even when being rejected repeatedly by men who were not worth her time. I see a person who works hard every day without complaint, who took over an unfamiliar household and made it run smoothly, who was kind to my sister and patient with my moods. I see strength and resilience and quiet courage, and I see beauty, the kind that matters, the kind that comes from character rather than chance. The tears spilled over then, running down Nathaniel's cheeks as she stared at him in wonder. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Russell stepped closer, his voice softening. Then everyone you have known before has been a fool. You are not plain, Nathaniel. You are beautiful. Not in the way that Marcus Thornton or those other idiots were looking for, but in ways that are far more important. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, because you are real and honest and kind, and those qualities shine through everything you do. Nathaniel could not speak, could not find words adequate to express what his statement meant to her. She had spent her entire life being told she was plain, being overlooked and dismissed because she did not fit conventional standards of beauty. To hear this man, this strong, honorable man who had no reason to flatter her, say that she was beautiful was almost more than she could comprehend. You do not have to say that just to make me feel better, she finally managed. I am not saying it to make you feel better. I am saying it because it is true, and because I have been wanting to say it for weeks, but I did not know how without making you uncomfortable. We have an employer-employee relationship, and I did not want to compromise that or make you think I had ulterior motives for hiring you. But seeing Thornton today, hearing him speak about you with such disrespect, made me realize I could not keep silent anymore. You deserve to know how I see you. How do you see me? Nathaniel whispered. Russell reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks, his calloused thumb surprisingly gentle against her skin. I see a woman I admire, a woman I respect, a woman I find myself thinking about when I am out working, wondering what you are doing, looking forward to coming back to the house at the end of the day because I know you will be here. I see a woman I would very much like to court, if she were willing to give me that chance. Nathaniel's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. Russell, I do not understand. You said when I came here that this was strictly a professional arrangement, that you were not interested in anything more. I know what I said, and at the time I meant it. I was not looking for a wife or a romantic relationship. I had convinced myself that chapter of my life was over, that I had my chance at happiness with Mary and lost it. But then you came here, and everything changed. You brought life back into this house, back into my days. You made me remember what it was like to have someone to talk to at the end of a long day, to share meals with someone who was interested in more than just the food, to have a companion who understood what I was thinking without me having to explain everything. He paused, then continued quietly. You made me realize that maybe I was not finished living after all, that maybe I deserved a second chance at happiness. I do not know what to say, Nathaniel admitted. This is all so unexpected. You do not have to say anything right now. I am not asking for an answer or a commitment. I just wanted you to know how I feel, to understand that when I look at you, I see someone extraordinary, someone worth courting properly if she is willing. We can take things as slowly as you want. Nothing has to change unless you want it to. Nathaniel took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Everything was happening so fast, and yet at the same time it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She thought about the past 2 months, about how comfortable she had become in Russell's presence, how much she looked forward to their evening conversations, how safe she felt in his home. She thought about the way he treated her with respect and kindness, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he had defended her to Marcus Thornton even though she would never have known about it if he had not told her. "I would like that," she said quietly. "I would like the chance to see where this might lead." Russell's smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds, transforming his usually serious face into something warm and joyful. "Then tomorrow evening, I will take you into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant. A proper date, like people do when they are courting." "That sounds lovely." They stood together on the porch as the stars came out overhead, not touching but standing close enough that Nathaniel could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The prairie stretched out around them in all directions, vast and dark and full of possibility. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, Nathaniel felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next evening, Russell drove her into Nevada in the wagon, both of them dressed in their best clothes. He wore a clean shirt and vest with his good hat, and she wore the one nice dress she owned, a deep green cotton that brought out the gray-blue of her eyes. Mrs. Patterson saw them arriving in town and waved enthusiastically from the boarding house porch, clearly delighted by this development. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Nevada, with white tablecloths and real china plates, and a menu that offered more than just the standard fare. Russell ordered for both of them, choosing dishes he thought she might like, and they ate slowly, savoring both the food and the conversation. He told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about his parents and their dreams for the place, about the challenges of running a cattle operation in an unpredictable climate. She told him more about her childhood in Philadelphia, about her parents and their love story, about the books she had read, and the dreams she had harbored before reality intruded. They were finishing dessert when Marcus Thornton entered the restaurant with a fashionably dressed woman on his arm. He stopped short when he saw Russell and Nathaniel dining together, his expression shifting from surprise to something that looked like calculation. He approached their table with false friendliness. "Everett, Miss Lawson, what a surprise to see you here together." "Thornton." Russell's voice was cool. "We are having a private dinner. Of course. I just wanted to say hello." Marcus turned his attention to Nathaniel, his eyes traveling over her in an assessing way that made her skin crawl. "Miss Lawson, you are looking well. Ranch life must agree with you." "It does, thank you. I am glad to hear it. When we met a few months ago, I may have been too hasty in my judgment. Perhaps I made a mistake in sending you away so quickly." The audacity of the statement left Nathaniel momentarily speechless. Russell, however, had no such problem. "Your judgment was indeed hasty, Thornton, but your mistake was not recognizing Miss Lawson's quality when you had the chance. Fortunately for me, your loss was my gain. Now, if you will excuse us, we were enjoying our meal." Marcus's face reddened, but he forced a smile and nodded to the woman with him, leading her to a table on the far side of the restaurant. Russell watched him go with an expression of disgust. "That man has nerve. I will give him that. Deciding you were worth another look now that someone else values you." "It does not matter," Nathaniel said, and she meant it. "His opinion is no longer relevant to me. I have moved on to much better things." Russell reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb caressing her knuckles gently. "So have I, Nathaniel. So have I." They finished their dinner in peace and walked through town afterward, Russell pointing out various landmarks and introducing her to people they encountered on the street. Everyone seemed to know him, and they regarded Nathaniel with friendly curiosity, some recognizing her from her earlier visit with Mrs. Patterson. The town's opinion of Russell was clearly high, and by extension, people treated her with respect and welcome that she had not received during her first visit. Mrs. Patterson invited them in for coffee when they passed the boarding house, and they spent an hour in her cozy parlor, catching up and sharing news. The older woman was clearly thrilled about the development in their relationship and made no effort to hide her satisfaction. "I knew you two would be perfect for each other," she declared. "I could see it from the moment I introduced you. You both needed each other. You just had to figure it out for yourselves." On the ride back to the ranch, Nathaniel found herself leaning against Russell's shoulder, comfortable and content in a way she had never experienced before. The moon was full, illuminating the prairie in silver light, and the air was cool with the promise of approaching autumn. Russell's arm came around her shoulders, holding her securely as the wagon rolled through the night. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "Yes, happier than I have been in years, maybe happier than I have ever been." "Good, because I intend to keep you that happy for as long as you will let me." Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened and grew. Russell courted her properly, taking her to town for dinners and church socials, bringing her small gifts like wildflowers or interesting stones he found while working, spending evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing. He was attentive without being smothering, affectionate without being inappropriate, respectful of the boundaries they had established while making it clear that his feelings were growing stronger every day. Nathaniel found herself falling in love with him gradually, the way dawn creeps across the prairie, slow and steady and inevitable. She loved his quiet strength, his dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, his obvious love for his sister and his ranch. She loved the way he treated her as an equal, asking her opinion on ranch matters and household decisions, trusting her judgment and respecting her intelligence. She loved the way he looked at her, as though she were the most fascinating person he had ever met, as though her thoughts and feelings mattered deeply to him. In October, a letter arrived from Rebecca containing exciting news. She had been offered a position at a hospital in St. Louis after graduation, a prestigious appointment that would allow her to work with some of the finest doctors in the region. She was thriving in her studies and had made close friends among her fellow students. She also asked pointed questions about how things were going at the ranch and whether her brother had finally admitted his feelings for his housekeeper. "Your sister is perceptive," Nathaniel said as Russell read the letter aloud. "She always has been. She probably figured out how I felt about you before I did." He folded the letter and set it aside. "She wants to come visit for Thanksgiving if she can get away from her studies. I would like that. I want her to see how happy I am." "I would like that too. I have missed her energy and enthusiasm." Russell stood and crossed to where Nathaniel was sitting by the fire, mending one of his shirts. He took the sewing from her hands and set it aside, then knelt beside her chair so their eyes were level. "Nathaniel, we have been courting for nearly 2 months now, and I need to tell you something. I love you. I have loved you for weeks, maybe from the very beginning, though I was too stubborn to admit it to myself. You have changed my life in ways I cannot fully express. You have made me remember what it feels like to be truly happy, to look forward to the future instead of just enduring the present. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me." Nathaniel's breath caught in her throat. "Russell, are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes. I know it might seem fast to some people, but I am 32 years old and I know my own mind. I know what I want, and I want you. I want you as my wife, my partner, my companion for whatever time we have left on this earth. I want to build a life with you, raise a family with you, grow old with you. I promise I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you know how valued and loved and beautiful you are." Tears were streaming down Nathaniel's face, but they were tears of joy this time, not sadness. "I love you too, Russell. I did not think I would ever find someone who saw me the way you do, who made me feel the way you make me feel. Yes, I will marry you. Yes to all of it." Russell pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest, and she could feel his heart pounding against her cheek. They stayed that way for a long moment, simply holding each other and absorbing the magnitude of what they had just promised. Then Russell pulled back slightly and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and finally her lips, a gentle kiss that held all the tenderness and promise of their future together. "We will get married as soon as we can arrange it," Russell said when they finally pulled apart. "I do not want to wait any longer than necessary to make you my wife officially. Unless you want a big wedding with months of planning," Nathaniel laughed. "No, I do not need a big wedding. Something simple at the church in town with Mrs. Patterson and a few friends as witnesses would be perfect." "Then that is what we will do. I will speak to the minister tomorrow." They were married 3 weeks later on a crisp November morning, with the leaves turning gold and red across the prairie and the air sharp with the promise of winter. Mrs. Patterson stood as Nathaniel's witness, beaming with satisfaction at the outcome of her matchmaking. A handful of Russell's friends from town attended, along with Frank, the elderly ranch hand, and the minister's wife. Nathaniel wore a new dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, a soft blue wool that complemented her eyes, and Russell wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly nervous as he waited for her at the altar. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with traditional vows that Nathaniel spoke with absolute certainty. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Russell kissed her with a tenderness that made her forget there were other people in the room. They were married, bound together by law and faith and love, and Nathaniel felt a sense of rightness settle over her like a warm blanket. The small reception at the boarding house afterward was cheerful and full of well wishes. Mrs. Patterson had prepared a feast, and someone had brought a fiddle, so there was music and dancing in the parlor. Russell held Nathaniel close as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, his eyes never leaving her face. "Are you happy, Mrs. Everett?" he murmured. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Everett." They returned to the ranch that evening, their home now officially shared. Russell carried her over the threshold, making her laugh with the traditional gesture, and then set her down gently in the main room. The house looked exactly as it always had, but somehow it felt different now, charged with new possibility and promise. That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Russell made love to her with a combination of passion and tenderness that left her breathless. He was patient and careful, aware that this was all new to her, guiding her through the intimacy with whispered words of love and encouragement. Afterward they lay tangled together in the darkness, her head on his chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her back. "I cannot believe you are really mine," Russell said quietly. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find this was all a dream. It is real. I am real." "This is real," Nathaniel assured him, pressing a kiss to his bare chest. "I am your wife and you are my husband, and we have a whole lifetime ahead of us." A lifetime sounds perfect. November passed in a haze of happiness as they adjusted to married life. Russell continued to work the ranch, but he made sure to come in for every meal and spend his evenings with Nathaniel rather than working late into the night as he had before. They talked about plans for the future, about expanding the herd in the spring, about the possibility of children, about all the dreams they were now free to share. Rebecca wrote regularly, her letters full of enthusiasm about her studies and delight about her brother's marriage. She promised to visit during the Christmas holidays, eager to see Nathaniel officially as her sister-in-law. Nathaniel wrote back with equal enthusiasm, telling Rebecca about the wedding and the life she was building with Russell, about the contentment she had found in the most unexpected place. In December, the first real snowfall arrived, blanketing the prairie in white and turning the ranch into a winter wonderland. Russell taught Nathaniel how to care for the animals in winter conditions, showing her the routines that would keep the cattle and horses healthy through the cold months. She proved to be a quick learner, unafraid of the physical work required, and he praised her strength and determination. One evening, as they sat by the fire with snow falling softly outside the windows, Russell pulled Nathaniel into his lap and held her close. "Do you ever regret how things turned out?" he asked. "Coming west to be a mail-order bride, getting rejected by those fools, ending up here with me." Nathaniel considered the question seriously, thinking back over the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain of her father's death, the uncertainty of her situation in Philadelphia, the humiliation of repeated rejections, the fear that she would never find a place where she belonged. "No," she said finally. "I do not regret any of it because all of those experiences led me here to you. If Marcus Thornton had accepted me, I would be his wife right now, living a life where I was valued only for my usefulness, not for myself. If any of those other men had wanted me, I would never have met you. Everything that happened was necessary to bring me to the place where I was supposed to be." "I am glad those fools rejected you," Russell said, "because you were meant to be mine, Nathaniel, mine to love and cherish and protect, mine to grow old with. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, inside and out, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." "I already know it. You show me every day with the way you look at me, the way you treat me, the way you love me. I have never felt so valued, so seen, so completely loved as I do with you." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low and listening to the wind whisper around the eaves of the house. Outside, the prairie slept beneath its blanket of snow, wild and beautiful and unchanging. But inside, everything had changed. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds were building a life together, creating warmth and love in the midst of the Wild West. Rebecca arrived 2 days before Christmas, stepping off the train with her nursing school friends waving goodbye behind her. She looked older, more confident, dressed in fashionable clothes that made her seem like a sophisticated city woman rather than a ranch girl. But when she saw Russell and Nathaniel waiting on the platform, she shrieked with joy and threw herself at them both, hugging them fiercely. "Look at you two," she exclaimed, stepping back to study them. "You are both glowing with happiness. I am so happy for you I could just burst." The Christmas season was magical, with Rebecca filling the house with her energy and laughter, helping Nathaniel prepare special meals, and decorating every available surface with pine boughs and ribbons. On Christmas Eve, they attended services at the church in town, singing carols with the rest of the community, and celebrating the season of hope and renewal. On Christmas morning, they exchanged simple gifts by the fire, the three of them creating new family traditions to replace the ones that had been lost. "This is what I hoped for when I decided to leave for nursing school," Rebecca told them on her last evening before returning to St. Louis. "I wanted Russell to find someone who made him happy, someone who could help him build a real life instead of just existing. Nathaniel, you have given him back his joy, and I will always be grateful to you for that." "He gave me the same gift," Nathaniel said softly. "He saw value in me when everyone else saw only plainness. He gave me a home and a purpose and love beyond measure. I am the one who is grateful." "You were both lucky to find each other," Rebecca said. "Hold on to that luck and never take it for granted." After Rebecca left, the winter settled in earnestly, with deep snows and bitter cold that kept Russell close to home more than usual. Nathaniel cherished the extra time together, the long evenings by the fire, the early mornings waking up in his arms. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and habits, building the foundation of intimacy that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. In late January, Nathaniel realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another week to be certain, then told Russell one evening after dinner, her heart pounding with a mixture of joy and nervousness. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Russell's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to wonder to pure, unbridled joy. He swept her into his arms, holding her carefully now as though she were made of glass, and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby. Nathaniel, this is the most wonderful news. Are you happy? Are you frightened?" "Both," she admitted, "but mostly happy. I want to have your children, Russell. I want to build a family with you." "We will take such good care of you," he promised. "I will make sure you have everything you need. We will get the doctor from town to check on you regularly, and you will not do any heavy work, and we will prepare everything properly for the baby's arrival." "I am not fragile, Russell. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Maybe so, but you are my wife and that is my child, and I am going to make sure both of you are as safe and healthy as possible." True to his word, Russell became almost comically protective over the following months, insisting that Nathaniel rest frequently, refusing to let her lift anything heavy, and bringing in a woman from town twice a week to help with the heavier household chores. Nathaniel alternated between being touched by his concern and exasperated by his overprotectiveness, but she understood that it came from a place of deep love and the lingering fear of loss that had haunted him since Mary's death. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with no complications beyond the usual discomforts. Dr. Mitchell, the town physician, pronounced her healthy and strong and predicted an uncomplicated delivery in late summer. Rebecca was thrilled when she heard the news, writing long letters full of medical advice gleaned from her nursing studies, and promising to visit as soon as the baby was born. As Nathaniel's belly grew round with their child, Russell would sit with her in the evenings, his hand resting gently on her stomach, talking to the baby and telling them about the ranch that would be their home. Nathaniel watched him during these moments, her heart full of love for this man who had saved her from a desperate situation and given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. "You are going to be such a wonderful father," she told him one evening. "I hope so. I am terrified of getting it wrong, of failing this child the way I sometimes feel I failed Rebecca by making her sacrifice so much of her youth." "You did not fail Rebecca. You gave her a home and stability when she needed it most. And you let her go when it was time for her to pursue her own dreams. That is what good parents do." In late August, Nathaniel went into labor on a hot afternoon while Russell was out checking on the cattle. Mrs. Patterson, who had come out to the ranch to help during the final weeks of the pregnancy, sent Frank galloping after Russell while she helped Nathaniel through the early contractions. By the time Russell burst through the door, wild-eyed with panic, Dr. Mitchell had arrived and everything was well in hand. The labor was long but not abnormally difficult, and Russell stayed by Nathaniel's side through all of it, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, their son was born, a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and strong lungs that announced his arrival to the world. Russell wept when Dr. Mitchell placed the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son in wonder. "He is perfect. Nathaniel, he is absolutely perfect." "He looks like you," Nathaniel said weakly from the bed, exhausted but happy. "He has your eyes. Look at those eyes. They are gray, just like yours." They named him James after Russell's father, and he was indeed perfect in every way that mattered. Russell was besotted with his son from the first moment, spending hours just watching him sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, carefully learning how to change diapers and soothe crying fits. Nathaniel had never seen him so utterly undone by emotion, and it made her love him even more. Rebecca arrived a week after the birth, having gotten special permission to leave her nursing program temporarily. She spent 2 weeks at the ranch, helping care for Nathaniel and the baby, teaching Russell the basics of infant care, and generally filling the house with her cheerful presence. Before she left, she held her nephew close and whispered promises to him about all the things she would teach him when he was older. "You two have built something beautiful here," she told Russell and Nathaniel on her last evening. "A real home, a real family, built on love and respect and partnership. This is what I always wanted for you, Russell. I am so happy you found it." The first year of James's life passed in the blur that all new parents experience, marked by sleepless nights and small milestones, and the profound joy of watching a new person grow and develop. Russell continued to run the ranch successfully, but he made sure to spend time with his son every day, teaching him about the land even though James was far too young to understand. Nathaniel thrived in her role as mother and wife, finding that the skills she had developed managing the household translated well to managing the needs of an infant. When James was 14 months old, Nathaniel discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous about the process, confident in her ability to handle another pregnancy and birth. Russell was thrilled, already planning for the future when there would be multiple children running around the ranch, filling it with life and laughter. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born the following spring, an easier birth than James's had been. She had Nathaniel's gray eyes and Russell's dark hair, and she was the most content baby either of them had ever seen, rarely crying and seeming fascinated by the world around her. Rebecca came to visit again, now a fully qualified nurse working at a prestigious hospital in St. Louis, and pronounced both mother and baby in excellent health. "You have done so well," Rebecca told her brother as they sat on the porch watching Nathaniel play with James in the yard, baby Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in Rebecca's arms. "You have built the life you and Mary always dreamed of, the life you deserve. I hope you know how proud I am of you." "I could not have done any of it without Nathaniel," Russell said. "She saved me, Rebecca. She brought me back to life when I had given up on ever being truly happy again. Every good thing in my life now exists because she came here and decided to take a chance on me. She is lucky to have you too. You see her in a way no one else ever did. You recognized her worth when others were too blind to notice. That is a gift, Russell. Never underestimate what you have given her." As the years passed, the Double E Ranch prospered. Russell expanded the operation with Nathaniel's full support and input, recognizing her head for business and her practical wisdom. They added more cattle, improved the buildings, hired additional help during busy seasons. The children grew healthy and strong, James becoming a serious little boy who followed his father everywhere, and Elizabeth developing into a curious, fearless toddler who got into everything. Nathaniel sometimes thought back to that August day in 1883 when she had stepped off the stagecoach in Nevada, Missouri, her heart heavy with disappointment and fear. She thought about Marcus Thornton's rejection, about the humiliation she had felt standing alone on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. She thought about how close she had come to complete desperation, to making choices born of necessity rather than hope. And then she looked at her life now, surrounded by love and purpose and belonging, and she understood that every rejection, every disappointment, every moment of fear had been necessary to bring her to Russell. He had seen beauty in her when everyone else saw only plainness. He had recognized her worth when others dismissed her. He had loved her for exactly who she was, no pretense or performance required. "What are you thinking about?" Russell asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the prairie while the children played in the yard under Frank's watchful eye. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Nathaniel said honestly. "How different my life is from what I expected when I came west. I thought I would be a mail-order bride to some stranger, tolerated rather than loved, useful rather than valued. Instead, I found you." Russell pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, and kissed the top of her head. "I am the lucky one, Nathaniel. You walked into my life and changed everything. You gave me back my happiness, my hope, my future. You gave me a family and a home in the truest sense of those words. I wake up every morning grateful that Marcus Thornton was fool enough to send you away, because his loss was the greatest gift I have ever received." "He told me I was too plain," Nathaniel said, not with bitterness but simply as a statement of fact. "He said I would not do for a man of his standing. Then he was blind. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, and not just because I love you. You are beautiful in the way you move through the world with kindness and strength. You are beautiful in the way you love our children and manage our home and support my dreams. You are beautiful in your honesty and your courage and your refusal to be diminished by the opinions of small-minded people. That is real beauty, Nathaniel, the kind that matters, the kind that lasts." She tilted her face up to kiss him, this man who had saved her life by seeing her value when no one else would. "I love you, Russell Everett, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. And I love you, Nathaniel Everett, my beautiful, brilliant wife. The woman who was meant to be mine all along." They sat together in the fading light, their children's laughter carrying on the evening breeze, the prairie stretching out around them in endless waves of grass and possibility. The house behind them was full of life and love, a home built not on shallow foundations of appearance and status, but on the solid ground of mutual respect, genuine affection, and the recognition of each other's true worth. Years later, when James and Elizabeth were grown and starting families of their own, people in Nevada, Missouri, would tell the story of Russell and Nathaniel Everett, the rancher and the mail-order bride who had found each other through rejection and chance. They spoke of the love that had grown between them, of the family they had built, of the life they had created together on the wild prairie. And whenever someone new to the area would ask how such an unlikely match had come about, Mrs. Patterson, now well into her 80s, would smile and say that it was simple really. Russell Everett had been wise enough to see what others missed, that true beauty lies not in the face but in the character, not in appearance but in substance. He had recognized in Nathaniel Lawson a woman of extraordinary worth, and he had loved her accordingly. That was the whole story, and it was enough. Nathaniel and Russell lived long lives together, weathering the challenges that came their way with the same partnership and devotion they had established from the beginning. They saw their children marry and give them grandchildren, watched the ranch continue to prosper, and remained devoted to each other until Russell's death at 74, with Nathaniel holding his hand and telling him one last time how much she loved him, how grateful she was for the life they had built together. Nathaniel lived 3 more years after Russell's passing, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, content in the knowledge that she had been deeply loved and had loved deeply in return. On her last day, sitting in the rocking chair on the porch of the Double E Ranch, she thought about that frightened young woman who had arrived so many years ago, expecting rejection and finding instead the love of her life. "You were right, Russell," she whispered to the prairie wind. "I was beautiful after all, because you loved me, and that love made everything beautiful." When she passed peacefully that evening, her family gathered around her found her with a smile on her face, as though she were greeting someone she had missed dearly. They laid her to rest beside Russell in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch, their headstones side by side under the vast western sky, bearing simple inscriptions that told the story of 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that lasted beyond death itself. And on summer evenings, when the light hit the prairie just right, and the wind whispered through the grass, ranch hands working the land would swear they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand toward the house, their silhouettes outlined in gold against the setting sun, forever together in the place they had made their home, the mail-order bride who had been rejected for being too plain and the cowboy who had seen her true beauty and loved her all his days.
Quiñones está haciendo sexo duro. Sí tengo a todos esos, los más petes nomás me faltaban. Y bueno, entonces está bien, boludo. Entonces estás chill de recojones, man. Brr. Espera. A ver si voy a buscar un video de terror, boludo, para mirar mientras tanto. Algún Dross. No, mirá lo que me aparece acá, boludo. ¿Ustedes conocen este tema? Piensa que con otra estoy haciendo lo que le hacía. ¿Conocen este tema? Escuchen, Este no era, boludo. Ahí está, este era. Solo me falta un delantero de garantía porque Raúl no mete ni a palo. Un compañero iba con un tosco con un toco de como 500 fibus y se le cayó y le robaron la mitad. ¿Escuchá? ¿Conocen este tema, boludo? Temazo. Yo al álbum del 2014 hice quilombo porque la portera de la primaria tenía a Eduardo Vargas de Chile. Era la única que me faltaba y le quería dar a Messi por él y la puta no quería. Le puteé y me expulsaron.
Baby, en la oscuridad, cuando estamos solos siempre en la intimidad, tú terminas siempre con los labios mojados, siempre me reclamas una noche más. Baby, en la oscuridad, cuando estamos solos siempre en la intimidad, tú terminas siempre con los labios mojados, siempre me reclamas.
Este tema de Pimpe, boludo. No, cringe. El tema de Pimpe este, boludo. Me hace decir que no conocí el tema de Pimpe, boludo. Qué desgracia. En el coche. ¿Este tenías vos? El mundial. Mi Globs, dice. Mi Globs mundial. Nuevo juego. Pedíselo gratis a tu kiosquero, dice. Lo tengo ahora. Gratis. Ya cortamos stream, Eli, hola. Ese es álbum del 2014 más o menos, ¿no lo conocés? No, la verdad que no. Yo no sé nada de álbumes, de figuritas, de cartas, no sé nada. Yo tengo el álbum mundial Micronesia 1712. A ver, Nuestros cuerpos salvados esa noche y no trato de pensar. Mirá, me salió un video de Dross. 3 videos paranormales y terroríficos de Argentina. Ojo, estoy para mirar ese videito, che. Traté así a mi mujer. Qué lindo es sentir frío. Mirá, estoy de busito, papá. Bueno, vamos a ver el video de Dross, boludo. Tengo ganas de ver algo de terror ya, boludo. Sí, boludo, porque siempre es lo mismo, boludo. Escuchen. Bajen el volumen. Yo sé por qué les digo, le voy a despertar a Dani. Hace intro y grabá. ¿Querés que grabe? Bajen el volumen, le voy a despertar a Dani. Para voy a grabar esta parte también. Entonces Félix pone esto en blanco y negro y queda en el principio del video, ¿entendés? Nuestros cuellos enredados esa noche. Bajen el volumen, le voy a despertar a Dani. Cajeta, boludo. Está despierta, boludo. Qué tristeza, boludo. Dale, boludo. ¡Boludo! ¿Por qué siempre que no me duermo piensas que sí? No sé, boludo. Y cuando me duermo no te das cuenta. ¡Ah! No sé. Porque sí. Porque sí, flaca. Flaca. No me claves tus puñales por la espalda. Brr. Bueno. Muestos guapísimos. Vamos a ver un video de Dross. Top 3 videos paranormales y de terror de Argentina. ¡Pling! Conectás mal. Es que las mujeres son impredecibles. Unas ganas de follar tremendas. Eso pensarás vos. No voy a tener chat, boludo. No voy a tener chat. Voy a tener que leer complicadamente. Pero apaga la luz. Bueno, tenés razón. ¿Se escucha? Ahí está. ¿Se me rompió el auricular? No. Fue el micrófono. ¿Qué poronga vamos a ver? No, subo pajero. Bueno, nos vemos, dejo la... Eso porque toqué el micrófono, boludo. Parecés don muteado. Fue sin querer.